Bucko, mighty Bucko, hello, and welcome to you all. Hope you're keeping well in these days. What an interesting author. Yeah. And I'm going to give you just a couple of clues. I think you'll guess pretty quick what I'm going to talk about. The first clue, who this author is. Oh, I've got a cup of tea and a bit of chocky. This says, move free chocky bar for dairy dodging chocky chompers. I guess not. Actually says that. Yeah, that's your first clue. You got a second clue, there's a poster behind me, but try not to look at it. And the last clue, me and Janie were in Cornwall in a taxi by the sea. And we're talking to the taxi driver, as you do, and he commented on the yellow type of moss on the little cottages and down the sides of the walls. And he says it's Lychen or Lychen. I says, yes, I said. I've read a book called The Trouble with Lychen, one of my favourite authors. And so I'll put you out your suspense, and it is in fact John Windham, sci-fi writer extraordinaire, highly underestimated, and I read his books as a young teenager. Some have been made into films. Now, his name was John Wyndham Parks Lucas Bain Harris. That was his name. And he took different writing pen names, but John Wyndham was the one that really stuck and the one carried him through to the end. Lived from 1903 to 1969. He died 65 years of age of heart problems, to my knowledge. During the Second World War, he served as a censor in the Ministry of Information. It sounds like Orwell, doesn't it? Now, what I'm going to do, and what's different about these little talks as I run through some of his books, and I'm not going to tell you the ending to any of the books. All I'm going to do is comment on things that jumped out at me in view of, yeah, and this, and Big Brother, and any other agendas. And I just want to bring them to your attention and simply read a bit from the books, and we'll go through them quickly. And I'll leave comments. I'll also comment on films that have been made as well. So we begin this one here. We may as well kick off with the Midwich Cuckoos. And it's a story about a sleepy English village called Midwich. A silver object appears over the village. The people fall unconscious for a period of time, and they awaken, and the end result is that women in the village are impregnated and are carrying an alien type of child. Very clever book. The title, Midwich Cuckoos, obviously a cuckoo lays its eggs in other birds' nests and pushes out the original baby birds for the big fat cuckoo, and the blackbird or thrush is feeding it away and it's becoming a monster. So clever title. I think it's better than the name of the film. The first film, 1960, with English actor George Sanders, black and white, English film, very well made, excellent suspense. I don't think it can be bettered. George Sanders is a hard act to follow. Very watchable, very enjoyable film. It was remade in 1995, again with the same title, Village of the Damned, with Christopher Reeve. There's good bits in it, as you know, but they're inevitably more violent, more gratuitous violence. I don't think they ever improve, really. It's very rare to improve on a well-made film. So the kids, basically, they mind control people. They have no empathy, no compassion. They're cold, they're clinical, they're totally self-protective, and they will destroy any threat by mind control and getting the people to kill themselves or turn on one another. And of course, the film I found, the 1961, opens with a field of sheep being led by the farmer, driven with the sheepdog in the direction that they want them to go. So it begins with sheep. There was a bit that I found interesting. After the children caused death, a meeting is held with high-up government people. A suggestion is made to lock them away, to which George Sanders replies, "You might as well do away with them altogether." And the reply from the military official is, "This is not a police state yet." And then George Sanders, he says, well, if you send soldiers, they'll only turn on one another. And of course, that's what happens in the gratuitous violence of the next one. As I say, this is worth a viewing. That's okay, but it's nowhere near. So that's the first one. A very famous one, Midwich Cuckoos. So, Day of the Triffids, you all will have heard of. Day of the Triffids. I read both of these books I've just said when I was a youngster. I've read quite a lot of his other ones fresh, which I'm going to be pointing things out, so I'm not going over bits from this. Comets come in, causing the inhabitants of Earth to be blinded. These Triffid type things, plants that eat people. And that reminds me, when I was small at infant school, they had one of these Venus flytraps, and we'd poke it with pencils and it would be grabbing like that. Maybe you've seen them as well. Again, excellent book, highly recommended. I mean, I'm not one totally given over to science fiction, but I do enjoy Windham's books. Now, it was made into a film in 1962 with Howard Keel. Excuse me. And I found it a disappointing film. There's a few touches, good things in it, but overall, no, it don't cut the mustard. And they've departed greatly from the original book. Only bits you would recognise. And it does highlight the problems of transferring a book where people in their minds are following it and reading it and seeing what the author is conveying, to try to put it across. The danger is, how do you get the triffids not to look ridiculous as moving plants? It's a fine line. To me, this is poor. It's a poor film overall, in my estimation. Then, in 1981, the BBC TV series, 6 episodes. Yes, sometimes the BBC does the odd thing from the past that seems to be of interest. Very faithful to the book. It carries the suspense well, the triffids look menacing, and the music score's good, and the acting is good. Very interesting, and enjoyed it. Good music score on that one. And then it was redone with it says in it on episode 3, I've got it written down here, quote, "The convoy will depart at 1200 hours. We cannot avoid infection by stopping longer than this. We have obtained certain big V's, which our medical officer will later inoculate us, but we cannot protect ourselves against all disease, and any epidemic against us will wipe us out or seriously reduce our numbers." In this one, 2009, two 90-minute episodes. Again, it don't do anything. It don't give anything new for me. And there's some seriously strange miscasting. Eddie Izzard plays the villain. He is actually, he plays a reasonable part, in fairness. And if you know who Eddie Izzard is, then you know the gender thing is, what can I say? He's referred to as she in Wikipedia. So, and other agendas are pushed. Global warming is mentioned. Triffid oil that saves the world from global warming. Complete nonsense. Which are nothing to do with the book whatsoever, but just pushing agendas. And there was one interesting point I found where Eddie Izzard goes into 10 Downing Streets, walks up a staircase, and there's 3 pictures of Prime Ministers shown. Ted Heath, Margaret Thatcher, and Tony Blair. Just found it interesting. It lingered on them and showed them. So, the next one. Trouble with Lychen. Now, 2 scientists, Francis Saxover and Diana Brackley, investigating a rare lichen. They find something within it that retards the aging process. And obviously then, how will that affect the world? Diana Brackley is a feminist in many ways. One of her aunts was one of the suffragettes and went to prison fighting for the vote, this and that. And she wants to do something to help women, this, that and the other. Francis Saxover, who runs his biochemist research lab, is very concerned where this is all going to go and how it's going to pan out. He's used the name Diana, I think, because of the goddess Diana of the Ephesians, and a goddess who would grant youth. On page 22, before she goes to work for Francis, Diana's tutor says, It could be interesting there, I think. Incidentally, did you see that he's now produced a virus that produces sterility in the male locust? Yeah. And page 58. In a world, says Francis Saxover, which is already overpopulated with a high birth rate, far too high. So they're concerned where this is all going to go, people living a long time. This isn't going to fit into the plans of any of the evil cabal, is it? The elites will want it for themselves. Let's see what we've got here. What did I put down here? And he says, Diana says here, rise in prices owing to increased demand by increased population, breakdown of national health services faced by population problems, rising in prices. We don't have that in our day, do we? Or do we? Yeah, I think we do. Page 89, yeah. There was a clip from Diana. She says, does our generation care about the misery it's bequeathing? Not it. That's their worry, we say. We say, damn our children's children, we're all right. Now, how many times have we heard Lee, myself, others banging on? How's this going to affect the kids? And we've seen people utterly unconcerned with the effects of their behaviour. Utterly not interested. And I'm reminded very quickly, I'm only going to quote one scripture verse. I'm reminded of this from from Isaiah in the Old Testament. Right, King Hezekiah has invited. He's had visitors from Babylon, and he's showed them all his wealth and his kingdom and everything. And it's upset Isaiah the prophet, and he's come to him and he said, "Look, who are these people?" "Oh, they've come from a far land. What have you showed them?" "Everything I have, everything I have." He says, "Well, the days are coming. It's all going to be carted off to Babylon as well. And your sons, they're going to be eunuchs in the palace of this king of Babylon." Listen to the word here. What a selfish word. Listen. And he's one of the better kings. Listen. Then said Hezekiah to Isaiah, "Good is the word of the Lord which thou hast spoken." He said, "Moreover, there shall be peace and truth in my days." In other words, he had so much time. It wasn't going to come in his time. Good, he says. That's selfishness, isn't it? Oh, I'm not concerned about the future as long as I've got peace and safety in my days. Yeah. Yeah. So, what else? 149. We've got the quote here. Now science, in its impious vanity, challenges the designs of the architect of the universe. Now, I recognise that expression, the architect of the universe, or the great architect of the universe, as a Freemason terminology. I've read numerous books of people who have left Masonry, and that terminology, the architect of the universe, is a Masonic term. 154. Diana says, "It is now announced to millions more women who will demand it," that is the serum of this Lychen, "and any attempt to withhold it will provoke a useful, incensing element of suggestion that they, a male government, are trying to oppress women by denying them longer lives. It may not be logical, but I don't think logic is going to count a lot, and it doesn't. And throughout the whole thing we've been through, common sense and logic mean nothing to people whipped up by fear. And then the response to people who, the elites, trying to steal this for themselves, obstruct, deprive, oppose and kill. Is that your fine creed? These have been tyrannies where life was held cheap, but none so tyrannous that it would curtail the lives of its whole population. And have we ever known anything more tyrannous in the days in which we've had to face and live? And then on page 193, there is a large demo at Trafalgar Square. Been there, done that one. Okay, Trouble with Lychen, very interesting book indeed. One of his best, I think. Right, we've got Chucky. Okay, so we've got a character, young lad, Matthew. We got his sister, Polly. And we got Mary, his mum. He's an adopted lad, a little lad from a baby. And his adopted dad, David. But he knows them as his mum and dad because that's who they are in that sense. And Mary's come from a large family with many nieces and nephews. And Matthew begins speaking to an unseen character who it turns out he reveals the name on page 25. The parents think it's an imaginary friend to begin with, but in actual fact it's an alien being that means well, but you know. So he says it was about 10 days after that we first heard about Chucky. It might well have been longer had Matthew not picked up some flu germ at school, which caused him to run quite a high temperature for a while. And he begins talking with his temperature to Chucky and this, that and the other. It's a fascinating book. In many ways, it holds the story. And here's something, they weren't quite sure whether Chucky was male or female. The parents say here, they say, however, we did get one thing more or less tidied up, the him or her question. Matthew explained. He says, Chucky does talk rather like a boy, but a lot of the time it's not about the sort of things boys talk about, if you see what I mean. And sometimes there's a bit of, well, you know, the sort of snooty way that chaps' older sisters often get. I said, I did, and after we'd discussed these and a few other characteristics, we decided that Chucky's balance did on the whole lean more to the female than to the male, and agreed that in future, provided no strong evidence showed up in contradiction, it would be convenient to class Chucky as feminine. So we've got an agenda type of, agenda of some sort going on. Fascinating book. I found another connected with that. A friend of the dad's recommends a chap he knows from Cambridge who may be able to help Matthew. Now, names are quite significant, aren't they, with authors? And the name of this chap was Roy Landis. Now, it may mean nothing to you, except for me, Landis is not a common name that I come across very often. Maybe it does with you, but not me. Now, what stands out for me is there was an actress called Carol Landis, that's right, who committed suicide. But she was in a lot of comedies and various things. And she was in a film called Turnabout 1940, where the husband and wife, through supernatural means, entered somehow each other's body, and the whole comedy thing was centred around that she's in his body and he's in hers, and yeah. So I thought the word Landis was significant with the gender thing, and we've already seen the gender thing with Chocky. Not quite sure whether he's male or female. I could be totally wrong on that one, and it's just coincidental. Don't know. Then there was, on page 130, the young lad Matthew is sort of abducted, a type of kidnapping, you could almost say an alien type of abduction, an implant of something. He's not harmed, this, that and the other. Not going to share any more on it. Brilliant book, really enjoyed it. Yeah, so we'll move on quickly. Okay, from The Kraken Awakes. The Kraken Awakes. Now, the Kraken is a name for a sea monster in Scandinavian folklore. And we've had attacks of plants upon people. Now, what about the waters being against you? Fiery red comets coming in, falling into the great depths of the waters, and then boats being sucked under and going missing. Yeah. A man-woman team, journalists, Mike and Phyllis Watson, man and wife, the main characters, and lots of interesting little bits and bobs going on in it. So let's have a look at page 15. It began so unrecognisably, had it been more obvious, and yet it is difficult to see what could have been done effectively even if we had recognised the danger. Recognition and prevention don't necessarily go hand in hand. And we all spotted early on what was wrong, but what could be done? How could we have changed it more than we did? And of course, the Americans think the Russians are doing it, and the Russians think the Americans are doing it. The situation thus remained unresolved. The non-Russian world was by and large divided sharply into two classes, those who believed every Russian pronouncement and those who believed none of them. For the first class, no question arose, their faith was firm. For the second, interpretation was less easy. Was one to deduce, for instance, that the whole thing was a lie, or merely that the Russians claimed to have accounted for 20 fireballs, they had only in fact exploded 5 or so. It was significant also that these fireball globes invariably sought the only regions of the Earth in whose high pressure conditions compatible with movement were available. These things falling into the depths. You suppose I concede for the moment that there does seem to be intelligence of some kind down there. You're nothing to support you but sheer common sense. And that's it. Again, we've tried reasoning so much with intellect and straightforward facts. Falls on deaf ears through what we've been going through. He gives a name for the couple living at Rose Cottage, and it's most peculiar. He gives the actual address of the cottage. Rose Cottage, Penlyn, near Constantine, Cornwall. Telephone number, Navas again, 333. Again, you got your threes. Freemason number. I could be going off on one. I don't know. And then there's this particular woman, she don't believe anything that's going on. She thinks it's the Russians, and they put these boats collapsing under the water to metal fatigue to begin with, and she says, my dear, she says, you don't mean to say that people down here really believe all this stuff about metal fatigue? Well, why not? Asked Phyllis. There's nothing very new about the idea of metal fatigue. Of course not, Tooney agreed. That's where they are being clever in putting this out. I mean, it's the kind of thing lots of quite sensible people will fall for, she added kindly. But in due case, it's all quite phony, of course. But it's practically official. It's in all the papers, she says. Oh, my dear, surely you don't believe official statements anymore. You mean the whole thing's been engineered by them right from the beginning? Asked Phyllis. It's just great. Some of these clips. Okay, I'm going to leave it there. I've got lots more. It will cut out after a period of time. I wanted to do the chrysalids as well, to be honest. Okay, a quick, see if it cuts out, it cuts out. I can't help this on my phone. Right, chrysalids. This is about an after-atomic explosion, and the world is in, there's different mutations, different people, and there's people. It just shows how a devastated world explores the lengths of intolerant people to keep themselves pure and to actually destroy those who look slightly different or have mutations or added fingers or toes. And they under a religious setting of justifying their atrocities, and by calling these things deviations, blasphemies, mutants, abominations. And on page 56, there is something, it says, whatever district you're in, they want to see your normalcy certificate. Does that sound like a big V passport? Have you got your normalcy certificate? And they've got inspectors. And I tell you what, this reminds me, when I was on the market, literally in the mid-80s, EU inspectors came round measuring the bananas to see if they were straight. I jest not. They did it on my stall in front of my face. Yeah. And so they've got these inspectors going around checking the things, if animals, and if crops are strange, or they'll burn them. They'll kill the animals. They'll kill people. And the mutant people, they have to flee in areas known as the fringes, the Badlands. And the main characters in the story who were in this sort of setup, they have a telepathic ability to communicate with some of the people there, but they have to keep it secret because they'll be killed as well. They'll be chased out. And then they're communicating telepathically to the people in the Zealand, which is probably New Zealand, And so great stuff, all great stuff. I'm going to leave it there. Others, quickly, before we cut out, The Web, Stowaway to Mars, The Secret People, Seeds of Time, Consider Her Ways and Others, and Plan for Chaos. But I've not got time. I've not got time to go. And with that, be a singer.